So, Max has always been my favorite character in Wizards of Waverly Place. This probably makes a lot of sense if you've seen My Babysitter's a Vampire video. I did talk for a good amount of time about how Rory was my favorite character in that show, and on the surface level, they seem to have a lot of superficial similarities with one another. For example, they're both portrayed as the silly, comic relief side characters. They're usually there to make quick jokes within the narrative, and canonically have the brain of a guinea pig, and are completely underused in the narrative and underrated, in my opinion. Even as a young kid, Max was always my favorite character. I was always excited to see him on screen or when there was an episode that focused on him more than the other characters. Justin and Alex being the main characters of the show does make the most sense. They're the most developed characters, and they get the most progress throughout the entire show when it comes to age and personality. So it's not like I think they should be outright shelved in place of Max being the lead of the show or anything. I just like Max's presence in the role that he's in, and I wish they gave him more to do. In my previous videos, I tried to leave out my personal relationship with certain shows just because I thought no one would really care. But I'll tell you right here, right now, that I've seen every episode of this show when it originally aired, or at least I thought I did. Because in 2021, I went back and decided to rewatch the entire show while I was on vacation, because I can't just be on vacation, I also have to be watching a TV show. I'd gotten through the first 2 seasons during my entire vacation, and immediately when I got home, I realized that I had never actually seen the finale. I remember stuff like Zeke being purple and then having to be hatched out of an egg, but I did not remember what the actual results were. So I'm almost certain that I saw part 1 of the 2-part finale, but I never saw part 2. Considering I was quite obsessed with the show, you would think I would have noticed that, but no, I didn't at all. So after having the revelation that I had not in fact seen how the show ends, for some odd reason, I went back and skipped all of Season 3 and all of Season 4 and just watched the finale straight up. And when I tell you I was upset doesn't even touch the surface of how angry I felt after watching that finale. It felt like a complete betrayal of everything that I had personally felt was good about the show. It did everything in its power to on my favorite characters and my favorite elements of the show, all in one fell swoop within the span of like 5 minutes. So I'm here today. I'm here to right a wrong. I'm here to explain how I think Max Russo should have been the family wizard. But not really, actually, because in reality, I just want to talk about how Max is my favorite character and how much I like about him and how he's been wronged throughout the entire show. And in reality, I don't think he actually should have won the Family Wizard competition when it comes to the actual narrative itself. That would be pretty diminishing. But I'm here to tell you about how Max should have been the family wizard. So let's get into it. So it's very clear to me that Max was a last-minute addition to the show that was never supposed to be focused on all that much. The original series mainly focused on the brother-sister bond between Justin and Alex, and he wasn't even in the original pilot. It's been pretty well publicized now, but the original show, The Amazing O'Malleys, had Alex and Justin being twins, and focused on them running a magic shop, and they were also wizards. After they shot that pilot, they decided to do some reworking, and a year later, they came up with Wizards of Waverly Place, changing a few key aspects of the series. I would say the biggest change that happened between the 2 pilots was changing the family from being the O'Malleys to the Russos. Making the Russos of Hispanic and Italian heritage really added a different flavor to the show, and I think, for me specifically, provided a lot of representation. And along with that change also came adding a 3rd Russo sibling. Which, can I say right out the bat, definitely changes the dynamic very quickly. I'm assuming that the plan to have a wizard family competition where only one of them gets to keep their powers was always a part of the series, even when it was The Amazing O'Malleys. So adding a 3rd sibling into the dynamic is very, very interesting. It's one thing to have two twin siblings compete against one another, and it's another thing to have a third, considerably younger child also in that competition. Something that a lot of Wizards of Waverly Place fans talk about a lot is, if this is a common thing in the wizard world, why do people have more than one child? We see this with TJ, who is an only child, and how he has much more developed powers than the other siblings have, probably because his family was able to focus his training on him specifically, and not three separate people who are all at different points in their wizard training. And we've learned from many interviews over the years that David Henry's character was supposed to be the main character of the show. But once Selena Gomez was cast, and this was exactly around the time Hannah Montana and other female-led shows were really starting to thrive on the network, they decided to shift the story to be more female-oriented, then making Selena Gomez's character the main character. Also because she was the teen pop star that was going to sell the show with her music and other outside merchandising. So it's easy to see how they always knew who was going to win from the very beginning. From the pilot, they knew which one of these siblings was going to be the family wizard. Or maybe they even had what the finale ends up doing in mind at the very beginning, which is, spoiler alert, having both Alex and Justin win the title of family wizard. And maybe when the show was The Amazing O'Malleys, Justin, or whatever his character's name was in that series, was going to be the winner, and then Alex was going to get her powers through an outside source. But then that was flipped once the main character changed, and Alex becomes the true winner of the Family Wizard competition, and then Justin gets his powers because he becomes the new professor of WizTech. Even though that is a little bit frustrating on its own right, because it kind of diminishes the whole only one Russo will become the Family Wizard, that is all well and fine. That I can handle. I can stomach that. But adding a third sibling in that was always constantly being joked about how he was never going to win really changes a lot. Because now, instead of it being a success story about how, yay, both siblings get to keep their powers, so now no one loses, it becomes, yay, the two people we were supposed to care about the whole time get their powers, and the third one gets nothing. Because you're not supposed to like him, you're supposed to think he's silly and weird and lame. Who cares about him? Get him out of here. Get out of here, guy. It's to the degree that I would say, why was Max even included in the first place? Which I know is weird coming from the person who decided to make an entire video dedicated to his character. However, I do think it's an important question to ask. Because was Max only added to upholster the new character lead shift that Disney decided to go with? Or was there a more less obvious example that made the show better in the long run? I could not tell you if I'm being honest. Max's last-minute inclusion comes out the most in the early episodes for most of Season 1, where he is exclusively only seen in plot lines with the entire family or his mom and his dad. I honestly bet the show could have gotten away with leaving Max as a mortal with no magical abilities whatsoever, since the show really never knew how to give Max his own magical storylines, and mainly just decided to give him silly antics to do around the house with everyday problems where magic really doesn't factor in all that much. In Season 1 especially, Max is only really involved in magic the same way his mother was. And we know that Teresa is, in fact, a mortal, and that is why Jerry is immortal as well. In episode 5 of Season 1, we see Max get his magical powers for the first time, which we're told comes through puberty. So taking a page out of the Season 3 lore that we learn, and going off of the idea that the Wizard Family competition runs on a level-based structure, so you reach a certain level in your learning before you graduate. We learned that Alex and Max were on level 3, whereas Justin was in level 5 in Season 4. So it's to be assumed that Justin, who is, I'm pretty sure, 15 to 16 at the start of Season 1, is most likely at a level 3. In that same episode where Max gets his powers for the first time, we learn that Alex and Justin are on the same level of learning. So in between Season 1 and Season 4, Alex must have just slacked off so hard that she just kind of stayed where she was at in Season 1 and had never evolved past that. Considering Alex and Max are at the same level at the start of Season 4, but she was considerably ahead of him in Season 1. So Max was able to catch up, kind of, if that makes any sense. So only now is Max able to start doing magic the same way his siblings have been, and they are considerably ahead of him, which is very upsetting. It just shows how unfair the Family Wizard competition is, that there was no way Max could ever win, yet he's assumed to compete with them on the same level. So in the early seasons, I understand why a lot of his narrative storylines are not about him having magic, because he's just barely starting to learn it. But the later seasons have zero excuses, okay? Something I want to highlight early on in this video is that by the end of the series, Max is the same age that Alex was at the start of the series. In most episodes of Season 1, actually, I think all episodes of Season 1 show Alex attempt to use magic and fail. So she has to learn her lesson and have her father help her out with magical abilities. I just want to make that clear right now, okay? Because that's going to become important later on. In general, Max is not afforded the same time and effort that the other two siblings were within the narrative, and I think because they're all siblings, they should be treated equally to a certain degree. Specifically by their parents, especially. Because to a certain degree, I understand that the show has a main character, which is Alex, and then Justin is very close to being the other main character as well. So I understand if most storylines focus on them, but I really do think within the show itself, if the characters were people in real life, Max would be neglected severely compared to the other two. And I just personally find that wrong, okay? They find excuses to keep him out of certain storylines for absolutely no reason, and barely even bother to humor the idea of how he feels about his place within the family and the competition and all of that. Because Max making jokes and not taking anything seriously takes precedent over him being a real, fully fleshed out, developed character. They'll do this thing where they'll give Max his own storyline and give him an emotional arc to play out, but then at the end, instead of them actually dealing with the situation, he just makes a joke and then they end it. The episode in the later seasons where he gets a girlfriend is a good example of this. It's described that Max is embarrassed of his family, both his siblings and his parents, although they don't make it clear whether it's one or the other or both, so I'm just gonna say it's both. He's embarrassed of his family and doesn't want his new girlfriend to know about them at all. So he pretends to be somebody else. His family tells him you should stop lying about who you are and tell her the truth, and he reveals magic to her, so now they have to convince her that magic isn't real, even though he took her on a carpet ride, and I'm like, okay, hold up. If you guys weren't so lazy, this would be a really, really good storyline to dive into. I really think the writers are just so lazy and don't see Max as having as much emotional and character weight as both Alex and Justin do, because it's not like the show shied away from serious moments. They had plenty of serious moments and family heart-to-hearts where a miscommunication happened in the early episode. A miscommunication will happen early in the episode, and by the end, they have a serious moment with no laugh track, no song, no nothing, just full-on the characters working out the problem that they set up in the beginning of the episode, and then coming to some sort of resolution. But for some reason, Max never gets to have that, and I really don't know why. Max could have a really serious heart-to-heart moment on the terrace with his mom or his dad or something. That's like, the reason why I didn't tell her about you guys is because I'm actually quite confused on who we really are as people. Like, are we wizards? Are we humans? I'm pretty much gonna lose the Family Wizard competition. It's pretty much confirmed right now. You guys don't even teach me anymore, even though I'm supposed to be in lessons. So I don't know how I should identify myself as. Like, I'm caught between these two worlds. And then Jerry could say, you know, learning magic is really important because that is who you are. You are Russo and we are wizards. But if you do lose your powers, because that is a possibility that you might lose the competition, you will still be Max at the end of the day, or some random situation like that, you know? Just have a nice heart-to-heart, have them hug, and then he can make a joke afterwards, like, man, I really missed that lizard, though. Like, come on. Do we really have to avoid emotional confrontation from Max at every given point? Because Max gets broken up with his girlfriend on the terrace, which is the second time this happens to a Russo brother, by the way. And they're like, aw, Max, you must be so upset that your girlfriend just broke up with you and ran away. Like, aren't you sad at all? And he's like, yeah, I am sad. Because I don't have the lizard anymore, and then we don't have to have any serious conversation anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why this was something they did consistently with his character. Because I like him being silly and joking and making jokes, but he also is a person at the end of the day. They never did this with Alex. Alex was able to be snarky and mean and condescending, but also had her soft sides, but that's just because she's the main character, and I feel like every character should have that development.
Everywhere I go, people expect me to be as devious as you are, or as smart as you are. I just wanted someone who doesn't compare me to anybody. Because I have a feeling I'll only be good when I'm not compared to anybody.
I guess Harper is a great example of a character who was very surface level and one note at the beginning that became really mature and developed and her own character that she could hold her own story weights with. I've been listening to the Wizards of Waverly podcast recently, and Jennifer Stone said that when she was casted, she fought to make the character a main character in a series regular because, she wanted to keep her job. So because of that, Harper becomes a very interesting character, and it has a lot to do within the story. How come Max doesn't? He's an actual sibling of theirs! Now I do realize that Jake T. Austin, who played Max in the show, was very young when the show started. I'm pretty sure the character is supposed to be 12 years old. So while yes, the other two siblings were young as well, he was very much younger than them, which means that when it comes to wages and working hours, the whole thing is different. This is something you'll see quite often with Disney Channel shows. I think Disney Channel slowly over time started making their characters older and older. I mean, I'm not the only one who's noticed this. A lot of the shows from the 2000s centered around middle school aged children, but by the time the 2010s came around, basically all of them were like 16 years old. And I don't know why this was. Maybe they thought they were maturing with their audience, but the audience themselves wasn't maturing. They were growing out of it, and new tweens were being replaced by them. So I really don't know why the characters within Disney Channel shows and movies just slowly got older over time, but they did. So I think in those transition years, in the early 2010s, they tried to keep a few younger-like characters within the show. Like in Sunny with a Chance, there was Zoya, who was also a lot younger than the other characters. And here, in Wizards of Waverly Place, there's Max. Maybe that's why he was included in the first place, because they wanted a younger perspective on the show. But because of that, Jake T. Austin had much different-looking working hours than Selena Gomez and David Henry and Jennifer Stone did. So I'm pretty sure that Jake T. Austin couldn't work as many hours as the other children could on the show. So because of that, the writers just didn't include him in as much stuff, maybe. But all that does is provide an awkward and weird presence within the show. That's why I kept asking the question, why was Max even included in the first place? If you weren't going to do him justice and you weren't going to treat him like the other characters were, and he was going to be a main sibling within the show, but you couldn't do as much with him as you could for the other ones from a legal perspective, then why did you include him in the first place? I still can't really think of a logical answer besides the one I said earlier, which is Disney Channel just wanted to have like an old remnant of their younger characters. At least when the entire cast is comprised of 12-year-olds, then the working schedule can adjust accordingly and they can all have as much screen time. But because certain characters can work more than others, then certain characters are just left out completely. It's just so bizarre. I guess the Wizards of Waverly Place movie is a great example of this. The main story revolves around Alex and Justin going off on the main adventure, and then Max doing damage control in the B-plot while at the resort. Max very well could have also been with the other siblings on that main adventure, and even at the end, during the actual wizard family competition that takes place, Max could have been there, but they have him get sucked into a tornado right before it happens. I just have to assume that Jake T. Austin signed a contract where he couldn't work as many hours as the other characters could within the movie, so he just had to be in less stuff. They just had to write around him not being in the narrative as much. It's just tragic to see, is all I have to say. Hopefully I look better in this video. I mean, I don't mean aesthetic-wise, I pretty much look the same, but I mean camera quality-wise. I think the camera quality was pretty low in the previous video. Also, you can actually see my eyebrows now, so maybe that'll add some new expression to this video. Okay, so here's the thing. I've already complained for a good amount of time about what I don't like what they did with Max's character. But maybe we should talk about what I like about Max, just to balance things out a little bit. So, something that I enjoyed about Max's character is how consistent he is. Like I said earlier, while I was watching the show, I finished the first 2 seasons and then immediately skipped to the finale. And something that really delighted me and surprised me and made me happy was that Max felt like the exact same person that he was, even after skipping all that time. Because so much has changed from the first 2 seasons to the final 2 seasons. I mean, not only from a quality standpoint when it comes to the camera, it was no longer in 4:3, it was in 16:9, and it was in HD, so that was a big shift. But also, the characters had evolved and become a lot more different over time, and it was nice to see that, yes, Max was, evolved to a certain degree, but he was also still the same character. I think Jake T. Austin did a great job of keeping the character consistent, while also applying the new changes that had been brought about. I think in Season 3, they made an honest effort to give Max more storylines and more stuff to do in the series. You can really tell that they had an idea for Season 3 and what they wanted all the characters to be doing. Mainly Alex and Max are paired together because Justin finished his wizard competition training and was doing, basically extra study, which I already talked about how that's unfair, so we're not going to get into it. Season 3 was also when they started dabbling more in serialized storytelling instead of keeping everything strictly episodic. So the one storyline we do get with Max is with his conscience, as he's called. Max is a lot more devious in Season 3. I think maybe they were basically just trying to give him the Alex treatment at that point. Obviously, some of that could be explained away by the fact that his literal conscience has been separated from his being, so now the parts of his brain that would tell him to behave are actually a physical person and has to tell him to in that sense. But even when his conscience is there and present, he still releases a bunch of monsters into New York, which causes Juliet to be kidnapped, by the way. I guess Season 3 is the biggest transitional period for him. I think they were really playing Max as someone who knew a little bit about who he was, he had kind of caught on to his scheme, if that makes any sense. There are a lot more self-aware jokes from him about how, oh, people see me as some dumb person, but I'm actually really smart. And then that's always played off as him being dumb.
Oh, look, another random comment from Max. Now I know what you guys are always talking about. That's why I just make people think I'm dumb, so if I slip up, they figure the kid's an idiot.
I forgot to mention that in the movie as well, Max is really devious. He's the first one of the 3 to actually perform magic just out in the public. It really seems like something Alex would normally do, but they decided to give it to Max. Like I said, I think the writers thought it just made the most sense to give the kind of scheming, childish, fun play magic elements of the story to Max for the movie, while Alex was going through this intense emotional struggle. That's how I'm choosing to interpret it. But maybe the writers were, to some degree, actually trying to make him more self-aware, and again, more like Alex. That makes sense because Max is around 14 in Season 3, which is the same age that Alex was at the beginning of the show. So maybe putting him in more teenage antics instead of, young kids, silly, family, quirky stuff was what they decided to do. That isn't what they decided to do in Season 4, but I can see that that was the direction they thought they were going to go in. Well, the whole Maxine thing also happens in Season 4, which, boy, are we going to talk about. But I feel like this can be attributed to the writers just not knowing what to do with Max. They don't know what they want him to be. I think the writers thought it was funny that a young kid had such elevated humor. They didn't relegate him to, cutesy jokes like most sitcoms with young kids did at the time. So early on, he would make quite quippy and unique remarks at things that are a little bit above his intelligence level as the show goes on, if I'm being honest. But then as the show went on, and he got older, obviously, I think they didn't really know where they were going to go with him. Again, that might be the remnant of the simple fact that he wasn't in the original pitch, and the original pitch was about the Alex and Justin dynamic, and not how Max was also involved in that. So that caused his character to kind of go in ups and valleys, if that makes any sense. Besides the conscience storyline, which shows his more devious side and more scheming side of things, which comes about because since Justin is finished with his studies, both Alex and Max feel the need to, hurry up their studies and try to get ahead or at least up to his level in the wizard competition. After that, we have the Wizards versus Werewolves plotline, which is a lot. Something I notice people don't talk about often is that Max actually was quite important to the Mason and Alex love story in those early episodes. Max pretty much seems to be the only reason why Mason is able to go talk to Alex in the first place after the fallout happened. Although this is another example of me being upset that they don't allow Max to have any serious emotions at all. In part 2 of the Wizards vs. Werewolves two-parter, Max, goes up to Mason and is like, I think you and Alex should be together, especially after Mason explains why he did what he did. So he was the main advocate for their relationship, and he's the only reason why they briefly got back together before Mason had to fuck off into the woods. And no one really talks about that because all of that emotional resonance is cut off with a joke and explained away as like, no, he doesn't actually have emotions though. This is why he's doing that. I think it would have been really nice for Max to want what's best for Alex and him thinking that being in this relationship with Mason was that. Whether or not he's correct or not is completely besides the point, but that would have been a nice emotional arc. Justin gets to do that all the time for Alex. I don't know why Max couldn't. It's funny how people's expectations of Max are so low that they really think that he can only screw up situations and not aid in them. In the Quinceañera episode, he's the main reason why Teresa and Alex can switch back because their grandmother was, being a nuisance. Same thing within the Shakira episode. I feel like when Justin isn't as involved in the problem-solving aspects of the show, Max could do a good job of filling in, of course being his own unique character and doing it in his own unique way, but could still fill that role, which means him being absent from a lot of A-plots is very upsetting. In my opinion, my perfect version of Max is somebody who canonically has embraced the absurdism of his life and is dancing on the grave of reality in the most sincere way possible, instead of trying to rationalize it like Justin or rebel against it like Alex. I like the idea of Max being able to manipulate the most random occurrences into his favor, simply because he's able to think differently than everyone else in the show. The Genie episode from season 2, I'm pretty sure, is a good example of this. Alex accidentally made a wish that literally makes him disappear, and they're like, we have no idea how to solve this. And then Max is just like, what if we put orange soda in the genie lamp? And they're like, that's stupid, that's never gonna work. But then they do it, and it actually ends up working. That's a very silly sitcom way of interpreting that, but I mean, this is a sitcom, so that's perfect use of his character, in my opinion. They should have done that more often. And I feel like it wouldn't have gotten tired or tropey because you could just think of even more weird, unique ways to use that ability of his. Maybe he could have been a fun aspect of the Stevie storyline also in season 3, which, boy, is that underused in season 3. Oh my gosh. Justice for Stevie is all I have to say. Again, another thing I really want to emphasize is that I don't want to undermine the relationship that Alex and Justin have. I think pretty much everything they do with Alex and Justin is pretty well done in the show. But I think giving Max a more developed relationship with all of the other characters would be nice as well.
Next time this comes around, I am not taking it easy.
Oh, whatever.
No.
Like you're taking it easy.
With all the puddles, who does
people.
puddles
Hey, I'm right
over?
here.
I think they should have played up the friendship that Mason and Max had with one another. I feel like there could have been some fun sitcom jokes from that. Like, I don't know, Mason loves trash because he's a dog, and Max loves trash because he's a gross goblin creature. Like, I feel like there's some potential there. A big thing that a lot of Disney Channel sitcoms do is they just revert to telling stories that could be in any Disney Channel sitcom. And usually school plotlines have a lot to do with that. And since Max, for the first half of the show, technically didn't go to school with Justin and Alex, he was not in any of those storylines. This entire half of the video has been basically me explaining why Max was not in so many plotlines and why I feel like he could have been because of his potential and how they wasted his potential. Because while the first 2 seasons relegated him to family plot lines and simple one-liners, by the time season 4 rolls around, there should be no excuse for the way that they treat Max. I think there's more beyond the surface of what they did wrong with Max's character, how horribly they ended up treating him within the narrative and the text itself. And it's not only just Maxine, it's a lot of other things as well. So I guess here's me doing my extended season 4 rant. Hope you enjoy. I just want to clarify I'm recording on a new day, and I'm feeling a little sicky icky, just a little bit like allergies, so if my voice just gives out halfway through this recording, I apologize. You're just gonna have to deal with me being a little hoarse. I really want to get this video out as soon as possible. So you know how I said earlier that I started listening to the Wizards of Waverly podcast in my free time? Well, just a few days ago, episode 8 came out, where they interviewed Wizards showrunner Paul Marietta, and after that, much has changed. I now have the pleasure of being able to rewrite this segment with the knowledge presented in that podcast episode that I didn't have when I had finished the previous sections of this video. So if you've gotten to this point in the video and wondered if I was misinformed or not, it's because I was, up until now. I understand it all now. At least I hope. I mean, who knows, a new episode of the Wizards pod can come out next week and have buckets of more previously not well-known facts about the show, and I'll have to rewrite this segment again. But even if that's the case, let's just soldier onwards. Season 4 feels like an awkward season for all of our characters, but it's especially weird for Max, who starts the season with the biggest opportunity for growth and ends it with, well, nothing. I guess I shouldn't say nothing entirely. I mean, spoiler alert, he does get to own the family business, but he's only 16 and his parents are relatively young, so he'll eventually own the rundown, on the brink of closing family sub shop and pass it down to his wizard's kids if he even has any. Season 4 is where the Russos are impoverished jokes really ramp up, along with every other joke that makes fun of the actors for sport. You can see how things maybe got just a little bit more lazy and more focused on spectacle over familial bond almost overnight. I'm going to speak on the Season 4 opening a little bit more later on, but it's clear that there was a shift in direction, which was pretty rough to see play out. Even before I knew that Paul Marietta had to leave the show for Season 4, I still thought Season 4 was just a hot mess. I don't mean to project or editorialize or anything, but it really does seem like the Wizards show was ran by passion and love for the craft, both by the actors and the writers, instead of just, filling in a time crunch, which I will admit was the case for a lot of Disney Channel shows. So when the show shifts from being above what Disney Channel programming was, and then at the end just becomes like all the others, it is a little bit upsetting to see. So I guess that's the explanation for why I got so upset watching Max and his underwhelming arc in Season 4. I always felt this way, but at least now I know why I feel this way. I was just going to do the whole segment being like, I don't know why Season 4 is so bad. It just is. But now we know why. So there's the setup for that. I guess what upsets me the most about Season 4 is the Sophisticated Wizards Club plotline, which is really the only time Max gets his own A-plot in the later seasons. And the entire thing just feels really contrived and kind of awkward when you actually watch it. Sure, it's nice to see Max have a group of friends who seem to like him and all, but the club is so clearly just a plot device so they can have Max want to move up in the family wizard competition without actually giving him any agency in the situation. Because character motivation and evolving emotional storylines are only for the older Russo siblings and not Max, I guess. Like maybe giving Max the agency and having him want to move up the wizard competition because he feels he's finally going to get some attention in the family. Maybe that would turn people against Max and think that he's a bad dude. But I mean, Justin goes through literally 2 evil Justin storylines and he's redeemed in the end. So it's not that the show couldn't handle having morally dubious main characters who get redeemed in the end. They clearly could. They just never thought of doing that with Max. They never saw him as an equal to Justin and Alex, which again, I've said multiple times now, I think that's wrong. That's why I'm making this video. So if anyone needs a refresher on the storyline, at this point in the series, Max has been basically guaranteed to be the family wizard because Justin and Alex have been pushed back in their competition. I'll talk more about that later. Because of this, Jerry wants Max to be more sophisticated or take the role of family wizard a little more seriously, so he signs up Max for the Sophisticated Wizards Club, which is a bunch of snooty wizards, one of which ends up dating Teddy and Good Luck Charlie, who don't actually see Max as an equal and just see him as a silly guy who says funny jokes. So they convince him to move up the family wizard competition so that he can become a wizard so they can keep him in his club as a sort of court jester. And then that's what causes Max to be turned into Maxine because of his older sibling's jealousy. Okay, so here's the thing. My brain is, hurting so bad with how much I'm feeling right now. Okay, so here's the thing. How are the sophisticated wizards who make fun of Max for the absurd things he says any different than how the audience is supposed to react to him on the show itself? Don't get it twisted. I love the particular way Max talks, and I think he is really funny, and I like him filling that role within the show. But the show never presents him as funny in the same way that it does for the rest of the characters. Yes, you're supposed to laugh at Alex and her quippy one-liners, but in a way that makes her seem cool and like this edgy rule breaker, and you're supposed to laugh at Justin and his embarrassing nerdy rants, but in a way that makes him seem like he's smart and he thinks he's better than you. But Max, he's strictly just the idiot younger brother that makes all the other people seem much more normal in comparison. The other characters just don't take him seriously whatsoever. So when the sophisticated wizards come by and make fun of Max for his particular way of understanding the world, I'm only assuming that we're supposed to think they're bad people for this, but the writers are doing the same thing to Max, just from an omniscient, godlike perspective, which retroactively makes me mad at the writers too, not just the characters for making fun of him in the show. Like, what exactly were they trying to accomplish here? Did they feel guilty or something? Because this genuinely makes me so frustrated I can't even explain it with words to a certain degree.
I'm literally gonna get violent.
And yes, maybe I'm taking this too seriously, but if you think I'm putting too much time and effort into the complexities of a Disney Channel sitcom for a kid's show that's been off the air for over a decade now, then I hate to say this, but this might not be the right channel for you. And I guess what's even more upsetting is that this wasn't even done on purpose as sort of like metatextual commentary. It was literally only done so it could be set up that Max decides to move the family wizard competition up, so then Justin and Alex can turn him into Maxine. That is so clearly why they decided to do this. And Maxine is a tricky situation all around. It seems that the reason Max was turned from a high school-aged boy to a very young girl is because of scheduling conflicts, but for some reason I can't find a definitive answer as to why Jake T. Austin wasn't on set for 6 episodes and Bailey Madison was his replacement. Everywhere I check from people who worked on the show, all they say is that Jake T. Austin had to film a movie. Specifically, people have said he was doing Hotel for Dogs or voiceover work on Rio. But I'm pretty sure the production on both of those movies were done even before the announcement of Season 3, let alone Season 4, so I don't think those are valid reasons for him to not be on the show. I haven't actually watched any interviews from Jake T. Austin where he explains this, so if there is an explanation out there, then I'm just not aware of it right now. But to a certain degree, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that, for whatever reason, Jake T. Austin was not going to be on the show for 6 episodes. And so they needed to figure out how they were going to write around that. Now, I will admit that the Maxine storyline seems to make sense. It seems like the most viable option, because you can still keep the character of Max within the show without having Jake T. Austin be there. So you don't have to do a Lizzie McGuire movie situation where you just have to write off the fact that he's like with his family in Mexico or something, because, you know, that is pretty awkward. So it seems like it makes the most sense. But oh my god, do they only do bad things with the Maxine storyline. The specific episode that entirely focuses on the beginning of this storyline actually makes me want to throw myself off of a bridge. After watching this episode, I decided to put rocks into my pocket and then just walk into the ocean. To sum up what ends up happening, basically Alex gets very jealous of Maxine because now there's a younger girl in the family. Technically there isn't, but there's a younger girl in the family, and Alex is feeling like her father's prioritizing Maxine more than she is her. We've talked about previously how Max is pretty well neglected compared to the other siblings, so I already have issue with Alex being offended that Jerry is deciding to spend one day with his younger kid instead of the multiple days he spent with Alex, if that makes any sense. Now, I do agree that it is very shitty that he skipped out on their monthly pancake breakfast because he wanted to hang out with Maxine instead. I do agree that that is bad, but he apologizes to her and makes up to it for her at the end of the episode, so all is well in that sense. What really makes me upset is that we're supposed to side with Alex and her jealousy in this episode. So Maxine is getting all this attention and is actually quite angry for once. We've never seen Max be like an angry or like vitriolic character. Maybe the gender dysphoria is causing him to act this way. So Maxine keeps beating up Justin because Justin knows that he can't fight Maxine because, you know, he's an 8-year-old little girl now. But Alex can't stand the attention not being on her for even one day so much that she casts a spell on Justin so Justin can beat up Maxine. And he does. Justin beats up Maxine because he's under a spell, and she literally gets knocked out. Like, she's literally, like, feeling woozy. Like, he actually beat her the fuck up. And after that happens, of course, Maxine's parents run to her and are like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And they wake her up and she ends up being fine, and everyone's like, oh, she's fine, she's okay, that's so great. And the moral of that scene is not supposed to be, wow, Alex really did a bad thing by being jealous and causing literal physical harm to her younger sibling, who is in a lot more vulnerable of a state than he was earlier. No. The moral of that scene was supposed to be, wow, Jerry and Teresa are really mistreating Alex by not giving her attention for one single fucking day.
I'm glad your little girl's okay.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay?
So now the episode has to be the Russo parents apologizing to Alex for spending time with Max, who is currently going through a lot right now because of Alex. You can't tell me that is like child favoritism in its finest right there. That is absolutely mind-bogglingly stupid. What were the Disney writers thinking? Like, oh my god, I'm going to put my face on a radiator and turn the heat up. After that storyline, Maxine just goes back to being B-plot fodder. The only interesting thing to come out of this is Max's new love interest, Talia. So Max is turned back to Max just in time for the finale era of the show to really kick into second gear. Now, I want to circle back to the older siblings being jealous of Max thing for a little bit and go back to the season 3 finale and the season 4 premiere. Because like I said earlier, it was their jealousy of Max being ahead in the competition which causes them to turn him into Maxine. I will admit to you now, only like 45 minutes or so into the video, I actually don't know how long this video is going to be, so I have no idea where we are timeline-wise. I will admit to you now that, to a certain degree, this video is technically clickbait. Because I feel like how the show exists in its current iteration, it could not possibly maintain the plot twist of Max actually winning the Family Wizard competition. Like, I don't think the show could handle that actually happening. I feel like people would be very mad. Which, the fact that that's the reaction people would have also says a lot about how Max is treated as a character, but that's besides the point. In all honesty, with how the show is set up, it's ridiculous to see that Max can even hold his own in the competition, considering how incapable of magic he seems to be in certain episodes. That's mainly why I think the writers who wrote Season 4 decided to make it the way they did, to have Alex and Justin be pushed down in the competition so that by the time the finale comes up, all three of them are at equal level, instead of Alex and Justin being at completely different levels than Max is. But considering Alex gets multiple awards and is able to save the world like 3 times before the competition ends up happening, it seems that even though they technically were pushed back in their rankings because they failed an important test in their training, the actual spells they learned were not like erased from their memory or anything. For example, it's not entirely obvious, and sometimes they flub this with the lore, but it seems for the most part that once wizards get to a certain level of skills, they can perform acts of magic without having to say spells. Something they establish early on is that once you have a wand, and you know a certain amount about magic, you don't really need to say spells anymore, you can just use your wand. And then same thing with your hands, you can do like hand magic as well. But the reason why you learn spells is because if you don't understand magic to a certain degree, you can just kind of make anything happen. It's very tricky, right? That's what most of the jokes surrounding their like family wizard training goes into. Like, if you don't have the right mindset and if you don't like say the right thing exactly the way you're supposed to say it, disastrous things can happen. But once you understand magic to a certain degree and you're fully capable of doing those things, you don't need to say spells. You can just kind of do it in your mind. So we see the Russos not having to say spells as often more in season 3 and 4 than we do in 1 and 2 because they're still in wizards classes in the first 2 seasons. Also, Max is technically also still in wizard classes, but we don't see that anymore because we're not supposed to care about Max. Something we need to remember is that Max is the same age that Justin was at the beginning of the show. He is 16 years old now. Now that Max is the same age, and he's being put in similar situations that Alex and Justin were in the earlier seasons, He's met with ridicule by his siblings because they're bitter that they failed an integral part of their training and Max didn't, and they're being punished accordingly. Like the scene where Max flubs a spell. In the Season 4 premiere episode, Max doesn't do a spell right and is chastised by Justin. So it's okay when you mess up a spell when you're 16, but it's not okay when Max messes up a spell when he's 16. Okay, I get it. I can understand why the family would be concerned that Max is going to be the family wizard. In the early seasons, people were saying the same thing about Alex. Jerry just assumed that Justin was going to be the family wizard because he was the most adamant and cared the most about it. But as time goes on, as Alex gets older, she proves herself more, and then she's considered a more viable option to be the family wizard. But Max doesn't get afforded that same privilege because he just happens to be born considerably younger than the other two. I think the twist that the Season 3 government agency plotline ended up just being a part of their training and was all fake is definitely a Disney executive Season 4 thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Paul Marietta decided they wanted wizardry to be exposed to the world, and that's what the Season 3 cliffhanger was going to be about. And then Disney saw that and said, "Nuh-uh-uh, we don't want this secret being exposed." So they cut him out of the project and then decided to rewrite that storyline so that the secret wouldn't be revealed. Because wizardry being exposed to the masses was hinted at in Season 2. So clearly that's what Paul Marietta planned on doing with that storyline. But then they just decided to backpedal and change it all. So while I agree that that is bad and wrong, I am only talking about the show as it is and not what it could have been. So in that case, Alex and Justin are so in the wrong for the entire beginning storyline of Season 4. They never once even mentioned the fact that Max actually did pass the test. They were given a test in their wizard competition, and Max is the only one who passed. Both Justin and Alex failed the test, so they were punished accordingly. And they keep saying throughout the episode, "That's not fair, that's not fair." And it's like, yes it is. That's how this works. I understand that the wizarding world is a very unjust and unfair place. Trust me, I feel like the Stevie Wizard Revolution should have happened. But now that the system happens to not work in your favor, you decide to question it? And that's never even brought up as like, hey, you guys are being hypocrites for that. Whenever something like that is the case for the characters, where they're in the wrong, it is called out by the other characters. But it never is with this storyline, which means the writers probably didn't even think about the fact that they were in the wrong. They thought they were acting just fine. And I really don't think it is. It's not fine at all. Max had a huge disadvantage in the Family Wizard competition from day one. And as soon as Alex and Justin are placed in the same situation that he was placed in previously, it's all of a sudden unacceptable. It's all of a sudden something that needs to be rectified and changed. They get so angry and jealous for finally experiencing the world that Max had to grow up in. They try to lie and manipulate their way out of it. And when that doesn't work and they end up accidentally physically altering Max into something that he is not, possibly changing his life forever, they refuse to take responsibility for it. And they don't even say sorry once. They never say sorry. They continue to treat him like trash. Actually, they treat him even more like trash than they did before. And then he's turned back and then it's just dropped. It's like, it's just dropped. Like, that is so toxic and manipulative and gaslighty. Can I use any other TikTok buzzwords? It is just genuinely infuriating. A few new updates. First of all, I cut my hair. Isn't that fun? I cut around 6 inches off of my hair. It was just very long and unmanageable and kind of looked disgusting in my opinion, so I finally just cut it all off. I'm still feeling a little sick, just a little icky. I'm pretty sure it's just allergies, but again, I really want to get this video done, so I'm recording for you right now. But no one really cares, so let's just get to the conclusion. So I'm pretty sure that's all I have to say about Max. I mean, there's definitely going to be more things I can talk about, like Talia. Let's talk about Talia. So one nice thing I can say about Season 4 is Max's new love interest and first ever real girlfriend on the show. I mean, yeah, season 3 did have Bella Thorne, but that was more of a family game night, look how weird the Russos are kind of storyline. And that episode did explore Max's relationship with the family, although not in the best way in my opinion, like I said earlier. But they at least tried, so I can commend them for that. With Talia, I would say they did a pretty good job of giving Max standard relationship stuff, like all the other characters had. Like with Alex and Riley, and Dean Moriarty, or with Justin and the goth chick, which is what they call her. I can appreciate that they call Justin's first ever girlfriend in the show the goth chick, because, she was goth. Something interesting to mention with Talia, though, is the class relations that come about. Talia comes from a pretty well-off upper-class family, and she seems to automatically shun Max and his sort of brutish ways. Like, Max isn't allowed to be gross or like video games anymore because he's dating Talia, and she forces him to like wear suits and do her interests and kind of ignores his things. But by the end of the episode, they solve their problems and they're able to function as a relationship after that. But then once Talia's parents meet Max's parents, there's a lot of interesting storylines there that just kind of don't go anywhere, which I understand the topic is a little more heavy than what Wizards of Waverly Place usually handles. This show wasn't like That's So Raven, where they would handle like race relations and like have very special episodes. Wizards of Waverly Place pretty much never did that. When Max's parents meets Talia's parents, there's clearly a lot of like class differences, and they literally say like, we don't think Talia should spend time with your boy because we don't think he's like high class enough. You guys are too lower class to hang out with our family, which could definitely, be a real conversation for the show to have, but instead they just kind of make jokes about how gross and poor the Russos are. Which I don't really have a problem with. I found it pretty endearing, actually. I could relate to a lot of the lower middle class struggles that the Russos go through. Or just in general, them struggling to be good parents. I think the episode where Justin graduates, and they're late, and they don't want to be the people who are in the overfill crowd, but they end up being the people in the overfill crowd. I don't know why, but I just still find that really funny. I think that added a level of relatability to the characters, but sometimes it just felt like they were doing it just because they couldn't think of any better jokes. But yeah, I never wanted Wizards of Waverly Place to tackle class relations at all. I don't think they were equipped for that, and I don't really want to see that from the show. But the fact that the Russos are pretty much being like discriminated against because of their class in this episode, and then it's just played off as a joke, just feels tonally dissonant to me. You think they would try to avoid a conversation like that if they weren't going to talk about it in any seriousness, A lot of season 4 feels like it was just first draft, get the episode out onto TV, In retrospect, I've gone back and I've watched episodes of the show, and I've thought, they did a good job with Max here. I don't know why I'm complaining so much in this video. Because yes, while there is a lot of complaining to do, in general, in average standard episodes, he does a pretty good job. His character fills a decent role, and I wouldn't say he's like being treated badly or anything. But when they do finally decide to give him his own time in the spotlight, man, they only mess it up. I guess it's easy to just wonder what they might have done with season 4 if Paul Marietta would have stayed on the show. Considering the direction he was going in season 3, I wonder how that would have evolved over time. While writing the script, I would sometimes stop myself and realize, wait, do I want Max to just be another version of Alex or another version of Justin? And I'm like, no. So why am I expecting him to fill the same roles that those characters do? To a certain degree, there's nothing really wrong with what they do with his character in most episodes. So I guess that's the conclusion there. You did the bare minimum most of the time, and you did the worst amount of stuff ever a small amount of the time. But you never did anything good. So there you go, there's the point. My original plans for this video was for me to talk about Wizards of Waverly Place in general, so I was going to do the whole Max thing, and the video was going to be about Max, but then at the end, I would add in all of my other personal feelings, most of which just had to do with Alex's love interests, so Mason and Stevie. But as I'm rearing the end of this video, I kind of feel like maybe let's just not. If I really want to make a video about Stevie or about Alex and Mason's relationship, then I can just do that later. I told myself I wasn't going to do that with the Mabab video, and I'm doing that with the Mabab video, so f*** it, let's just do it with this one as well. When it comes to the Sarah video and maybe the Stevie video, they probably won't come out for some time now because, Even though I do still want to talk about them, I've really been focusing my direction on the poll that I made on Tumblr a few months back. I want to make sure I get through all of these topics first before I retrospectively go back and do extra videos, so hopefully they won't come out too late and hopefully I'll still be interested in them. At the end of the day, if I no longer become interested in a topic, I just won't make a video about it anymore. For example, I was gonna make a video on Glass Onion and Knives Out, but I was focusing so much on the Mabab video, I told myself, when you're done with that video, then you can make the one on Glass Onion. And then by the time I was done with the Mabab video, I was like, I don't really care about Glass Onion anymore. I mean, I still have some interest, and I have like a half-written script done, so maybe one day I'll want to pick it back up again, but for now, I'm okay with just leaving that topic in the dust. Unless people comment saying they want to see it, then maybe I'll become reinterested again, but for now, for sure, the next video that's gonna come out is going to be about The Sweet Life on Deck, and in extension, the Sweet Life series in general, so I'm gonna talk about Sweet Life of Zack and Cody as well. That one I'm really excited to talk about because I've been thinking about that show a little bit too much for like a year now, so get excited for that. That'll be out in the summertime. So I guess that's it. Lampy, subscrampy, clampy, ampy. Goodbye.
So give it